The shortest highway in Texas runs through the Texas State Cemetery. That highway is State Highway 16, and how that came to be was that Bob Bullock, who was lieutenant governor and then later state comptroller, he knew that he was terminally ill and wanted to be buried in the state cemetery, and he went and examined the cemetery and just noticed how deplorable it was. So there is a natural road that runs through the state cemetery. Well, he designated that as the state highway, Texas State Highway 16, and then that way he could apply for not only state funds but also for national funds to refurbish a highway.
So the state of Texas defines cultural heritage districts as effective tools for economic and social development because they attract artists and other cultural enterprises to the community, they encourage business and job development, and they address specific social needs of the community. So Austin's African American Cultural Heritage District in fact meets all of those criteria by establishing tourism destinations, preserving and reusing historic buildings, and serving as a catalyst for fostering continued cultural development of African Americans in Austin's urban core.
The district is not just a geographical location, which is really important for preserving our history, but it's also a living program.
The newly minted African American Cultural Heritage District and the Cultural Heritage Facility, which sits on 11th Street, is a very important institution. It was built in 2012, and it is really the only monument, if you will, to the history and culture of African Americans of East Austin.
Well, Austin's first public library was started in 1926, and that library was not open for blacks. Now, this happened about 6 years after the city approved of their 1928 master plan, which created the Negro District. The black citizens petitioned the city to open a branch library to serve black patrons. So the city took that old public library that was in a wooden structure and they moved it over to its present location on Angelina Street. Then later on, the library was named the George Washington Carver branch of the Austin Public Library. Anyway, in 1979, a new edition and much larger edition of the George Washington Carver branch of the Austin Public Library was built, and the original became the George Washington Carver Museum. It was Texas's first neighborhood African American museum.
So everybody kind of knows, oh, east of 35 was more of an African American side of town and west was, but lots of people don't know why that was. So it's very interesting to hear that that was actually a city-ordained law.
The traditional East Austin area was the place that I grew up in and where many African Americans long ago were forced to live.
At that time, there were black communities, or what they call freedmen communities, all around Austin.
The city plan was to place black people in the community away from where they started out. The threat was you will not get city services unless you moved over here east of East Avenue. And only here recently has that story been talked about. We don't want that to happen again.
African Americans are currently the only major race or ethnic group in Austin seeing a decline in population, and meanwhile, Austin is one of the fastest, if not the fastest, growing cities in the nation.
African American Cultural Heritage District first came to my attention through my participation in the African American Quality of Life Initiative. And that was back in 2005. And that initiative basically was a community city government collaboration looking at why there were such disparities within Austin's African American community. So that initiative looked at employment, education, police and safety, housing, health, and one of the areas was arts and culture, and I was asked to chair the Arts and Culture and Entertainment Task Force. The community came up with 52 recommendations overall through all the task force, with 10 recommendations through the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment Task Force. One of the major issues was that there seemed to be no public celebration around the culture and heritage of the African American legacy within Austin.
When we created the African American Quality of Life Initiative, it was never going to be the answer to everything. It was a start, and by working closely with our African American Commission, we hope to continue that progress.
In 2005, the recommendation was presented to City Council for the development of Cultural Heritage District.
Our City Council took steps through the African American Quality of Life Initiative to ensure that those boundaries were created, and then a group of citizens led by Lisa Bird and others took the step to ensure that, now even from a state perspective, not just from a local perspective, the area is recognized as a traditional African American district.
In 2007, City Council passed a resolution designating the boundaries for the district. Manor Road to the north, 7th Street to the south, Airport to the east, and of course I-35 to the west. In 2009, we submitted an 1,000-plus page designation application to the state of Texas that detailed the history of this area, the redevelopment work that's been done in this area, and the need to preserve the cultural assets of the African American community as this area quickly becomes gentrified. Also in 2009, we formed our first steering committee that was charged with figuring out how to put together a cultural heritage district. Did site visits around the country, Kansas City, Houston, and did over 10 conference calls with cultural heritage districts around the country to figure out best practices. We also hired consultants out of Philadelphia, Risco and Associates, who did some community engagement meetings and helped us put together our identity statements, our mission and vision, purpose statements, and an 18-month operational plan. And officially in 2013, the ad hoc community steering committee transferred into a professional board of directors of the newly incorporated Austin African American Cultural Heritage District.
Now, John Chase was the first Black student in the University of Texas School of Architecture and the first Black graduate of the University of Texas School of Architecture in 1952 when he graduated. Well, John Chase went on to design a number of buildings of importance in Austin. He is best noted for his design of David Chapel Baptist Church.
So what does this district actually do? We preserve and maintain the community's cultural assets. We document the stories of people, places, and events that made Central East Austin one of the city's most desired neighborhoods. And we celebrate the cultural and artistic contributions through festivals, exhibits, and community events. And lastly, but most importantly, we educate. We educate all who are interested about the legacy of this unique community through tours of historic sites, oral histories, and blogs that tell the continuing story of Central East Austin.
Hi, my name is Terry O'Connell. I am the immediate past president of Preservation Austin, and I'm a local architect. I specialize in the restoration of historic buildings. What makes Austin special? What makes Austin unique? Because all of these historic buildings, they're one of a kind, and you can't find them anywhere else, and it helps define our identity.
The Board of Directors of Austin's African American American Cultural Heritage District believe if they are successful in their quest in 5 years, the district will evolve into a city resource and community hub. Through collaborations and partnerships, this team will expand the vision of preserving and protecting the cultural legacy of East Austin's historically Black community to becoming an all-inclusive cultural and creative community resource in the city of Austin and a model for future districts throughout the United States.
Certainly the district boundaries and preserving our history are important, but it's also serving as an area to help connect the community, and particularly the African American community. You know, we offer everything from the Carver Library, the Carver Museum, the Cultural Center that we just recently opened, and we're hoping with Austin being so vast that it can act as a focal point to help connect the community and the African American community, those who have lived here all their lives and those who have relocated.
What we need to do is bring some more people into Austin. We need to bring some more people that have concern for the city.
And so I think that what the district's role here as a community is to embrace, celebrate, to educate people of the cultural history, and to try to form a bond via the culture that existed previously, but also a bond via the culture that happens today. A place without a past is a soulless place. A place that embraces and celebrates and builds on its past is a very rich place. And so the challenge of, say, the district is to try to foster a place that celebrates its past, but is not just simply mired in its past, but actually builds on that past.
I hope to see an organization that is vibrant and alive, that conducts tours. It's a destination point for persons coming. I hope to see some documentation of the historic sites with markers. I hope to also see this organization is giving birth to ideas, birth of experiences, a rejuvenation to folks to say, hey, we can do just as they did and we can do it better.